All right, good morning, everyone. How y'all doing?
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, so before I begin, I just want to thank the Marshall G. Johnson Scholarship Fund Committee for inviting me and allowing me to serve as a keynote speaker today for this Education Day event. It's great to see people invest time and resources in supporting education in our young people. So now, as we pay attention to current events today, and we see all the things going on in the world, it's more important than ever that we as parents and guardians take greater control over our children's education. Now, there will always be elements that are outside of our control. Things like budget cuts, school politics, and lack of resources. But we do have control over the type of values that we instill in our children before they walk out the front door. Now, let's be honest. Some of our kids don't walk through the front door. Some leak through the back door, or perhaps sneak through the window, right? Because some of our kids are sneaky. But regardless of how they leave our house, it is still our job to make sure they're equipped with the tools that they need to succeed in the world outside. And one of the most important passions we can instill in our children is the passion for education and for reading. Now, I'll be real with you. Growing up, in Brooklyn, I wasn't a big reader, right? In elementary school, I read comic books, and perhaps on Sundays when they had a Sunday paper, I would read the comic strips. But outside of that, really nothing. And then in high school, they had us read those assigned books like, Shakespeare, Othello, Catch in the Rye. And let's be honest, we didn't want to read those books either, right? Because we really couldn't identify with the material. Now, it wasn't until one day, or even before that. Now, I did read, again, being from New York, I used to ride the subway to school every day. And if anyone is familiar with, the culture in New York, you don't make eye contact with people while you ride the subway. So, right? You mind your business, right? So, and after a while, riding back and forth in the subway, you get kind of tired looking at the advertisements and the posters on the wall. So I used to read the newspaper just to kind of, give me something to keep my eyes focused on, right? But it wasn't really until one day I was challenged by one of my classmates where I really got a passion for reading. Now, during the time, the school that I went to, it was a predominantly white high school, and it was called Xavier High School. And the baseball hat that the school, like the baseball players, and they sold in the bookstore, it was a burgundy hat with a blue X on it. Now, some of y'all that are old enough to remember back in 1992 when the movie Malcolm X came out, that everyone was wearing those X hats, right? The black hats with the white X on it, right? And that was pretty much a very popular fashion apparel during that time. And again, growing up in New York City, again, in New York, you had these, predominantly white kids going back and forth to school with these burgundy hats with the X on it. And people not knowing thought they were wearing it for Malcolm X, not knowing it was for the high school. So they were pretty much being harassed on the trains. Like, what do you know about Malcolm X? And then one day, one of my teammates, I played football, we were on the sideline talking about the whole situation. And this gentleman was of Italian descent. And, we was talking about it. He said, now, most of the people who probably harassing these kids probably know nothing about Malcolm X. And I said, that's not true. And then he said, okay, well, tell me why Malcolm X is important. And it kind of stumped me. Because now I was familiar with Malcolm X because I was very, very much into hip hop, listening to Public Enemy, Brand Newbie, and stuff like that. So I was familiar with who Malcolm, with the speeches and stuff like that, but exactly who Malcolm X was, I had no idea. So I was stumped, and I was embarrassed. I said, wow, this guy caught me, and then I didn't have an answer. So a couple days after that, I went down to Barnes & Noble's and bought the autobiography of Malcolm X. And that was the first book that I read from cover to cover. So, with that being the first, book that I read it because I wanted to read it. I had a why to read it, not because a teacher assigned it to me or I was forced to read it, but because, again, I had a why and a purpose behind reading the book. And that tells me that, if the why is strong enough in our children, they will find a purpose to want to read. So it's us as parents, it's our responsibility to spark that interest in them, that curiosity, that moment of purpose. And here's some practical things that we as parents can do. Now, if we have young children, we can start early, right? Sit down, read with them at night. I remember my parents used to read with me at bedtime, just to, give me early exposure to books. Question yourself, do we have bookshelves at home with books on them for our kids to read, right? And perhaps find books that they're interested in, right? Are they into sports, fashion, cosmetics, stuff like that? You can find books or magazines that cater to their interests, and they'll find a purpose to want to read. Or perhaps start a family book club, or encourage our children to have a book club with their friends. I remember some years ago when Harry Potter was popular, people was out there buying Harry Potter books and started book clubs surrounding that book. With the other books, we can do that as well, including the Bible, right? Amen. Right? Perhaps our children have career interests. We can find books if they want to be engineers or entertainers or whatever. There's a book or a magazine that caters to that. We can leverage technology. We have audio books, e-readers, reading apps. Leverage those resources. Because again, we have to embrace technology. We can't run away from it, and we can't allow our kids to fall behind. So let's use the technology that's out there to help, help our kids become more literate. Visit the local library. Nowadays, the library is more than just books. They have other activities, to kind of get you inside the door. Not too long ago, I did a resume writing workshop at the library in Verona, and they had a whole drumming group came in there, and it was banging drums in the library where it's supposed to be quiet. But nowadays they understand that people aren't just coming there to read books. They have to have other activities surrounding to bring people there. And then while you're there, grab a book. They're free, right? We know we like free. And one of the most important things we can do is to be the example, right? Because our children watch us. They observe us. They observe what we do more so than what we say. So we can't tell them to go read a book if they don't see us reading, right? So we got to set the example. And we see that, throughout history, our community has fought against deep systematic challenges, voter suppression, redlining, food deserts, and so on. So there's many gaps that exist. And when I wrote the book, Malik's First Job, Financial Principles for Teens, I took on the challenge of, tackling the financial literacy gap that exists within our community. I wanted to give our young people information that they can use to become more financially literate. That way they can help close the racial wealth gap and learn about money as they get older. And let's talk about one critical stage in our youth development. That's the 3rd and 4th grade. Now, this is the point where our children go from learning to read to reading to learn. And if they struggle through this transition, they become disengaged from school. And there's information out there that says there's a link between 3rd and 4th grade reading scores and the school to prison pipeline. So we have to, kind of, again, take this very serious. And oftentimes I see parents, they show up on the weekends at sporting events, the basketball games, the football games, the track meets. But yet, you go to the parent-teacher conference, parents are absent. This has to change. In order for us to make change in the world, we must first make changes in our world. Legacy isn't built overnight. It's built on awareness, intention, and action. So today, I challenge every parent, grandparent, aunt, and uncle in this room. Take action. Be intentional, raise readers, and support learning. Because our children's future in our community depends on it. Thank you. Amen.